Hello and welcome to Building a Working Menu Workshop. I am Debbie Collins. I'm with Illinois State Board of Education. I'm a principal consultant. Today we're going to talk about menu planning. We're going to discuss menu planning as it pertains to the National School Lunch and School Breakfast programs. The agenda for today is going to be meal pattern requirements, just a brief review of the breakfast and lunch requirements, a planning checklist. We're going to talk about accurate measurements in crediting foods, standardized recipes, production records, cycle menus, and at the end of this presentation I have some resource tools available for you. Things have certainly changed over the years with the breakfast program, and this year is no different than others. We have some new things that we're putting into place, but as you can see in these pictures, we've come a long way from where we started. The breakfast requirements now are 3 components: the grain, fruit, and milk groups, and each day a student must be offered 4 items. A sample of this would be 1 ounce of cereal, a 1 ounce slice of toast, 1/2 cup of orange slices, and 1 cup of milk. In school year 2013-14, there is only a 1/2 cup requirement of fruit for the breakfast program. In the school year following, it will be 1 full cup for each grade group. The vegetables are not required in the breakfast program, however they may be substituted in, and there's more directions, and I'll show you a link where you can get further details on the specifics of the breakfast program. Also in the breakfast program there is a requirement of grains, 1 ounce requirement for each of the 3 grade groups shown, with minimums of 7, 8, and 9 respectively. There are no meat alternate requirements for the breakfast meal pattern that we are now under. Fluid milk remains the same as it has been before, 1 cup for every grade level, offered daily. Other specifications that are now in place for the breakfast meal pattern are calorie ranges. The K through 5 is 350 to 500, 6 through 8 is 400 to 550, and grades 9 through 12 is 450 to 600. Saturated fat must be no more than 10% of the total calories. And the sodium requirements that we're looking at here will be phased in over the next 3 years, beginning with next school year, phase 1. Trans fat remains as it has been last year, and for the school lunch program, 0 trans fat per serving. The lunch program has seen a few changes of its own, and this year we're hopefully seeing less than we did in the year prior, but I want to review with you the requirements for the meal pattern for the lunch program. Daily there are required 5 components: the meat alternate, vegetable, fruit, grain, and milk. This is the overall look at the chart. Let's break this down by groups. In the lunch, the fruits are 2.5 cups for the K through 5 and 6 through 8 with a 1/2 cup minimum requirement. Grades 9 through 12 must be offered 5 full cups over the course of the week, 1 cup per day. The vegetable subgroups, which I'm sure we're all pretty familiar with from last year, 3/4 cup vegetable daily for the grades K through 5 and 6 through 8, and 1 cup daily offered to the 9 through 12. Grains, we have a minimum requirement in each of the grade groups: 8 for the K through 5, 8 for the 6 through 8, and 10 for the 9 through 12, with a 1 ounce requirement daily for the lower 2 grade groups, 2 ounce minimum requirement for the 9 through 12 age. Meat alternates, we also have minimum requirements. Daily there must be 1 ounce served to the K5 and the 6-8, with a weekly range for the K5 being 8 total. 6 through 8, the minimum for the week is 9, and grades 9 through 12, the minimum offered is 10 ounces. Again, fluid milk remains the same, 1 cup per grade group, offered each day. The calorie ranges that we were introduced to last year are K through 5, 550 to 650, 6 through 8 is 600 to 700, 9 through 12 is 750 to 850. Last year we talked to you about how USDA made a compromise for us for those grade groups that fall between K through 8. You can do a combined menu. This would look very similar to the 2 K through 5 and 6 through 8 menus. However, these highlighted boxes show you the difference where you must focus and have at least no less than 9 grains offered with a 1 ounce equivalent each day, and also for the meat, 9 ounce required with no less than 1 ounce offered per day. And the calorie range is much smaller because of the combination of the 2, so it is 600 to 650. Again, saturated fat must represent no more than 10% of the calories. Sodium ranges, also for the school lunch, will begin next year and phase in 3 parts, ending in 2022-2023. And again, trans fat must be 0 unless it naturally occurs in a food product. This is a clip from our webpage. There are several resources here about the meal patterns. Today is more focused on the planning of a menu, so we're not going to focus so much on the meal pattern requirements. Hopefully you've conquered those for the lunch and are just about to understand all the breakfast. But if you have questions or would like a review or have new staff, I would recommend you go to this webpage, click on any of the links that you find here, and you can get quite a bit of information about the breakfast meal pattern, offer versus serve, and also the production record that we'll be referring to later can be found at this location. This is a planning checklist, and it looks a bit overwhelming on this one slide. I've made it this way so that you can print this off and use it as a checklist for yourself, but we're going to break it down into smaller sections and look at each one more closely. Begin planning your menu by scheduling a time that's free to you. You're going to be uninterrupted and available. Have your time to look at your materials, have your thoughts collected, and maybe in a quiet place if you can find that. What you're going to want to have on hand is your food buying guide, access to your food buying calculator online, the distribution list from products that your distributor has available to you, and probably the meal pattern charts that we were just referring to would be a good tool to actually have available as well. The second one here, consider the previous menus that you've served. With the new meal pattern, some schools thought that they had to completely scratch and start over from the beginning. I believe that it's better to maybe rebuild off of what you have had as successful menus in the past, taking those menus and seeing what you can continue to serve and how to build into the new meal pattern using what you already have. Also, you're going to need to determine what time period you're going to be serving. Will it be a 5-day cycle, or would you like to begin adding 5-day weeks together to create a cycle menu, which I'll explain more later. You need to focus on what age grade group you will be serving. There was the K5, 6-8, the K8, or the 9-12. You'll want to consider the menu requirements for those, including the minimum and the maximum calorie ranges that you need to stay within. Also, you have the choice as the planner on how many choices you will allow the student. You can give them one entree, you can give them multiple entrees. You can allow for them to have different vegetable choices or fruit choices. That is up to you as the planner, and probably is dictated a bit by the facilities that you serve out of. But this is up to you, and it can vary from week to week, or on occasion seasonally you may want to change this up a little. To begin your menu, you're going to want to build off of your entrees. So you're going to select the entree for breakfast and lunch and start with that each day. After you've selected your entree, you're going to want to select the additional items, and keep in mind when you're working with the lunch that we do have the vegetable subgroups that have the weekly requirements. So as you build onto your lunch, make sure that you're meeting each individual vegetable subgroup throughout the course of the 5-day week. Again, milk must be offered in 2 varieties. I think most of us have that down from the last years, but again, that must be offered so you can decide if you're going to have flavored or unflavored milk and what percentage of fat you want to have in your unflavored, whether it is 1% or skim. Make sure that you're meeting these requirements for all of the groups, again, the minimum serving requirements as well as the full weekly requirements. Meeting the minimums in each one of the grain and meat will not meet your full weekly requirements, so there will be days that you need to serve above the minimum so that you can fall within the range for the minimum requirement for the daily and weekly. Once you have your menu put together, do an overall evaluation of it. Take a look and see, does it fit with the students that you know that you have had in years prior? Does it fit with the staff that you have available to work on preparation? Look at holidays, look at occasions that are going on in the school. Check to see if you're doing a cycle menu, does your cycle repeat in such a way that days that might be busy for the students are also days that you're busy, or there's field trips planned and you're going to need to make some adjustments. Look at your overall plan. You're also going to want to consider things in the school. If there are Spirit Week, students like to see you involved in their activities as well. So one suggestion is if it's pajama day, it might be a good day to alternate in breakfast for lunch. The students will appreciate your sign of spirit in joining in their celebration of their possibly homecoming or other occasions that they have. Marketing is the last part of your planning, and you need to think of ways that you can sell your product, make it interesting to the students, give them a reason to come through the line and be excited to have school lunch. Some districts have chosen to go to seasonal menus where you have more of a cold lunch in the warmer seasons and a hot lunch during the cold seasons. You can also go with themes or different ideas seasonally. Another thing that you might consider for marketing is just having tastings. If you want to introduce a new item, have the students maybe have a panel or a classroom that is the ones who try the product out and can maybe be your best advertisers for those students who are reluctant to try something new. Next, we're going to move on to how to measure and the proper measurements. This has been confusing for many districts, and over the years we've seen it change from cups and ounces and back and forth, but now it is strictly ounce equivalents for grain and meat alternates and cups for fruit, vegetables, and milk. Let's start with the fruit, vegetable, and milk category. This is a tool that I use personally at my own desk. It's very helpful. In this slide, it's hard to determine what it says. There is information at the bottom of this slide where you can order a copy of this for yourself, or it's available online at the National Food Service Management Institute website. Here is a little bit larger view of their web page, and two categories that I find we most often have trouble communicating between ounces and cups. When we're talking about a ladle that's perhaps the number 2 ladle, it's a 1/4 cup measure and it's 2 ounces of fluids, but in that 1/4 cup you could have a 1/4 cup of mashed potatoes or a 1/4 cup of Rice Krispies, and you're certainly going to have a different weight in the end. So what we want to see when you're planning your menu is that you're actually using a cup measure for your salad items, and so that we can determine how much you're actually serving the student and the quantities required. Also with the scoops, the same thing. Many times we know that you call it maybe a number 8, but you're really saying a 1/2 cup. What we want to see is that you're using a 1/2 cup serving. With this, the 1/4 cup and the 1/2 cup, if you have a grade 9 through 12 and you're serving a fruit or vegetable, for instance, and you know that you must offer them a 1 cup, but perhaps they're not going to be interested in the full cup, I would recommend that you serve with a 1/2 cup scoop and offer the students 1 or 2. And therefore, if they take 1, they've met the minimum requirement of the 1/2 cup. If they take 2, they've had the full serving that you have offered for them. The same goes for the elementary grades, K through 5, 6 through 8, or in the K-8 plan. Using the 1/4 cup ladle, you can serve a student the 3/4 cup vegetable pretty easily. What you're going to want to ask this group is, do you want 2 or do you want 3 scoops or 3 ladles? So then you can distribute the food to them in a fashion that's easy for you to keep the line moving. But I would highly recommend ordering this if you don't have it already, or downloading it offline, just to keep it as a good resource of how to convert your ounces into cups. When we're talking about ounce equivalents for the meat alternate and the grains, I want to begin with our grain chart. This is a 2-sided chart. I've only have one side available here for you, but I want to go through a short activity to show you how to determine the ounces in a slice of bread or in a bun. In this example, I'm giving you a nutrition facts label from a bun package, and you can see that Group B off of our grain chart is where you would find the buns for hamburgers and or hot dogs. It's in the bun is in the Group B. This bun is actually in the Group B, is 1 ounce is equivalent to 28 grams or 1 ounce. When we look at the label for this, we see that the serving size is actually 53 grams. And when we do our calculations, 53 grams divided by the 28 that we found in the chart equals 1.89 ounce equivalents. Grains are always rounded down to the nearest 1/4 ounce. So this 1.89 ounces is equivalent to 1 3/4 ounce of a grain product. Many of our schools, if you're a high school and you're serving hamburgers, hot dogs, chicken sandwiches, be sure that your buns are actually meeting the 2 ounce requirement. In this case, this bun that's 1.75 would not be meeting the minimum requirement for the high school. You would need to go ahead and give them something else to make up for the missing 1/4 ounce equivalent. You may want to consider this when you're ordering products. Look at the measurements, make sure that they're meeting your requirements. You may be able to find a bun that's the serving size that will meet your full requirement. Let's move on to the meat alternate, ounce equivalents in this. This can be a little bit tricky because many times we see schools just measuring things by the true ounce weight that you have in the maybe raw product or a product that's filled with water. The first one I want to show you here is a beef patty. This is a 100% raw ground beef patty that comes in a 3 ounce frozen form. But if you look at the bottom of this screen, the CN crediting amount for that 3 ounce raw beef patty, once it is cooked, is really only a 2 ounce equivalent. So be sure when you're ordering and you're crediting these foods that you look at their equivalent after they are prepared, what their true ounce equivalent is for crediting in the menu. Another example we see a lot is lunch meat. This one is a ham product. It has water added to it. 1.22 ounce serving of this really only equates to a 1 ounce equivalent. So if you're slicing it and weighing it on a scale and considering that measurement your true ounce equivalent, most likely it is not. You're going to want to find something such as this with a CN label or some way to determine the true ounce equivalent of the meat alternate that you're serving. A few items that are not something we measure by ounces would be the tablespoon of peanut butter or nut butters. That's equivalent to a 1 ounce equivalent. Cheese is a 1-for-1. 4 ounces of yogurt or Greek yogurt actually are a 1 ounce equivalent. Half of a boiled egg is a 1 ounce equivalent. 1/4 cup of cottage cheese is a 1 ounce equivalent. And 1/4 cup of legumes is also a 1 ounce equivalent of meat alternate. Standardized recipes is another area that we need to talk about when we're looking at menu planning. Standardized recipes are recipes that consist 2 or more ingredients. Anytime that you have added a second item to any food, it needs a standardized recipe. So this includes adding salt to corn or butter in your green beans when you're warming them up. All of these things would result in the need for a standardized recipe. With a standardized recipe, you end up having a consistent product and meeting the nutrient standards a little easier because you know that each time you are serving this, you're serving the consistent amount of food and you're also serving it to meet the standards that are required. A standardized recipe will help in the case of a substitution. If someone's there in your place for the day, they don't know how you make your special recipe. If you don't have it written down, perhaps the product will turn out differently and may not have the same consistency and that therefore may not meet some of the standards. Cost control is another area that is helped by standardized recipes. It helps you to determine how much you have on hand and how much you will need. By keeping the recipes available, you can calculate out when ordering. I'm going to start with an example of a standardized recipe. This is Cowboy corn salad. You can see this recipe has been given an ID number. For the purposes of demonstration, I've kind of made this up. It's a vegetable with a CC for Cowboy corn, and I labeled it BCC1. So this would be our recipe ID number, and I will show you later where we're going to use that ID number. The number of servings is important on a recipe because your staff will need to multiply this by the number of servings you need to serve for the day, so that needs to be showing on your standardized recipe. It's good if you can show on the recipe what the actual components are in the food so that you know how to add those up for the weekly totals that you need, especially in the fruit vegetable. This recipe is 1/2 cup of other vegetables and 1/4 cup of legumes. Another important part of a standardized recipe is the serving size. It's easy to end up with product running out if you don't have it written on the recipe, or maybe underserving an amount of something so that you don't meet your requirements if the staff does not know once prepared how much to serve to the students. Another very important part of standardized recipe are the steps in how to prepare. For instance, in this one, step number 1 is to thaw the corn in the refrigerator overnight. I think there would be a little problem if in the morning this was pulled out and started. So just having your standardized recipe available helps you to prepare perhaps in advance in a case such as this. Production records are another big step in menu planning. And this is basically your recipe to your staff of how you want the day's menu to be produced or cooked for the students. So we have a couple of examples. This is the original standard production record that you see often. This one says lunches, but it could be also used for breakfast. It's available on our website. This one was developed last year with the introduction of the vegetable subgroups. Again, either one is fine. So long as you have the categories listed across the top, you can create your own production record. But for every lunch and breakfast, there needs to be a production record for your staff to work off of. I put together a sample production record for you. On this, I'm going to show that it's for Lincoln School. Perhaps you're in a district where you plan for several different buildings. You're going to want to differentiate by putting the name on the production record so you know who to give it to at the end of your planning, what day you're going to be serving the meal, and then the number of projected lunches that you're going to have for the day. That's probably going to come from the morning count or a previous record of how much you serve when you have this menu offered. In the top right-hand corner, you're going to see where you can list your reimbursable meal. This helps you and your staff to know everything that goes into and accounts for the reimbursable meal. We don't need to see quantities here. That's going to be listed below, but if you can just give us the standard menu and how that equals a reimbursable meal. That information is then translated down into your food items and used, and how they are broken down into the different groups. You'll see what I referred to before, the VCC1. This is our recipe ID. If you're using a recipe, for instance, the Cowboy corn salad, listing all of the multiple ingredients that were on that could take up half of your production record. So in this case, we just list the VCC1. That tells your staff to go back to the recipe and calculate from that recipe how many they need to prepare, and then follow through with the plan that you've given to them. It is possible to use the same production record for grades K through 8 and 9 through 12. You just need to indicate on the different lines the serving amounts and grade groups that those are intended for. So in this, it shows the grade groups. In this line, we're showing the serving sizes. The K through 8 is receiving 3/4 cup because that is their minimum requirement for vegetable. The high school is being offered 1 cup because, again, that is their minimum requirement for a vegetable. The student projected number is what you anticipate you're going to need to prepare for this day. And so this is going to be reflected by the grade groups and broken down for each of the items. If you have staff or parents that participate in the program, their numbers are going to fall into this, and this is going to be the students plus those additional adult meals that you think you're going to need to prepare for. So this is the final number. When your staff is looking at this, they're going to say we're doing 122 during the time that we're serving K through 8. 129 need to be available during the 9 through 12 serving periods. In this one, we're going to see where the amount of food that was actually used, taking into consideration that you prepared perhaps more, or some things come in quantities, like this chicken, for instance, may only come in 25, so you can't really stop at 122. When you're preparing it, you make 125. Sometimes you might want to prepare a few extra over the top in case there is one that gets away, or someone comes late and isn't on the lunch count but will be participating in your lunch hour, or a parent or teacher that decides to join the students. Student servings, this section is the actual counts, and this is going to take place after you have served the meal. So this part should not be completed until the meal service is finished and you know what your counts are for the day. So in this line, you're going to tell us the actual numbers of servings that you gave to the students. This section is for a la carte. If, for instance, in the high school you allow a student to have an additional chicken sandwich, you would count this, and that 4 would maybe be 4 additional servings or chicken sandwiches that were served by themselves, not in part of the reimbursable meal. And then in your adult serving section, this is going to show how many adults participated and how many of the meals that you actually served were for the adults. And then we have our leftovers. This is after you have the amount used, subtracting the amount that were served to students, a la carte, and adults, and this is going to tell you what is left at the end of the day. This is somewhat of a spreadsheet for you to keep track of where your food, all of it, is going. In the instance of the chicken patty, we know that we have 2 left over, so that we know at the end of the day we should see 2 somewhere in the building, or account for those. This is so that you have a good count of what you have left, perhaps if it's something that can be reserved later, or you have a good account for what is waste, and perhaps adjusting the menu next time so that you don't have a large amount that is thrown out. You may need to adjust your total projected number based on what you see in leftovers from time to time. Offer versus serve is another practice that can be used for any grades K through 8. It is optional. 9 through 12 it is required. This is where students have the opportunity to decline any of the food items. There are some new specific rules with the fruit and vegetables and the line and the number that they must take at the end of the line. Rather than taking up much of our time for this, there is a webinar training available online that goes into great detail on offer versus serve. I would recommend it for your staff that are maybe new or just coming back and need a refresher on how that looks on a tray, what things to do equate a reimbursable meal, and what students are allowed to decline and what they must take. This is a sample of a production record where you might have a K through 12 building where you're offering something different to the 9 through 12. You can see the original production record is there on the top, and then I've added in some pizza, carrots, salad, pineapple, some other fruit and vegetable choices that are only to the 9 through 12. Again, it's fine if it's a K through 12 building, if you want to put them all on one production sheet so that your staff has one place to go for direction, we're fine with that. If it makes it easier for you to divide this up into sections based on who's going to be preparing things, whatever works for you, we just want to see it on a production record at the end of the day. One thing I do want to point out to you is the tossed salad. I think we had it ingrained in us last year pretty clearly that a salad is only equal to half of its volume. So in this I gave the example that it's really a half-cup creditable tossed salad, but your staff needs to know that they'll be serving 1 cup to equal that half-cup creditable serving. Cycle menus. This is a new area, or an area that I want to go over with you, just discussing how once you've put the time into planning these menus, you may want to consider serving them a second time or on a rotating basis so that you know you've met the requirements, and once you find things the students like and participate in, you begin serving those on a rotating basis. So at this time I want to ask, just for those of you who are out there, if you would respond, this is your chance to let us know what you're doing. How many of you are serving a cycle menu for breakfast? If you can just check on the yes or the no, or if it doesn't apply where you don't serve breakfast. 77% of you are using a cycle menu for breakfast. 7% of you are not. And 16% of those who voted, it does not apply for you. So that's pretty interesting statistic for us, just to see that many of you are already implementing this at breakfast. Breakfast is one of the meals that is probably the easiest to rotate the menu because there are less requirements as far as subgroups and vegetables and seasonal items. Let's go on and do the same for lunch. How many of you are serving a cycle menu at lunch for any of the grades K through 8? Okay, when we look at the results for lunch, the K through 8, I ask in this way. I didn't ask K through 12 because we know that 9 through 12 it's required. So for 81% of those voting, you are choosing to use the cycle menu in grades K through 8. 12% of you are not, and for 7% it doesn't apply. So maybe you have different options at your district. That's very interesting. Thank you for playing along. We're going to keep these statistics in mind as we go forward. The benefits, for those of you who are not using cycle menu, it reduces the labor planning of the menus. Once you've made that menu and you know that it works, you can put it into a cycle, and you can begin building your weeks in your cycle and repeating those throughout the calendar year. It does reduce plate waste many times because we see students taking things that they intend to eat rather than taking things that they will not be eating and throwing right into the trash. It helps you with your purchasing and planning for the future. You know what you have on hand, you know what you need to purchase in the future, and this will help you to hopefully reduce waste and purchase less things going straight to the trash. Also, when you're using a cycle menu, you can begin to see what the students really like, what they participate when you serve, and you can hopefully have those days rotating through your cycle so that you have greater participation in your lunch or breakfast program. This is a sample from the Ohio Department of Education of a cycle menu. The Ohio Department of Education actually has broken theirs down into seasons. This is the fall cycle menu for the grades K through 8. And when you look at this menu, you begin to see a pattern. If you look at Monday and Friday, you see that they serve more of a traditional American fare every week. When it comes to Tuesday, they switch to more of an Asian Oriental menu. On Wednesday, they try Italian foods, and on Thursday, they introduce the Mexican menu. This is something that students will begin to catch on to. They'll know what days you're serving at least what type of food, and they may or may not participate based on that. But hopefully that will increase your participation when they know kind of what to expect. And you can use something like this, or it can be completely separate days. But this is just an example of one district menu where you could use it and help yourselves by repeating this menu. This is available online on the Ohio Department of Education website. We do have a link to that on the page that I showed you prior, where you can go and see the different seasons. They also have a winter and spring and summer menu that you can look at. Now I want to go over a few resources with you that are available online. I'm not going to click on them today for the sake of time, but many of those are available for you to use in your planning. You may want to preview them, print some things off, have them available when you sit down for that planning period. So let's take a look at our resources. Beginning with, we have the menu planning tools for food service. This is a page where you can see over to the left. You can browse by subject. You can do recipes, menu planning. You can look at best practices. The Kansas menus are listed on here. There's different standards. There's a sharing center where you can even give us some of the ideas that are working great for you. This is where you can kind of talk to each other across state lines and throughout the country because we're all using the same menu pattern. You can maybe get some regional ideas and some new ideas, hopefully from those who are outside of our region. This is a menu planning page. There are many tools here that talk about whole grains, sodium reduction, what kinds of things are in season. The beans, peas, and legumes has been kind of a tough section for many of us. This has a section dedicated just to that with ideas of menus and recipes, and again, some menu planning tools. This one is more along the line of giving you recipes, and it has different recipes, different states, ones for kids and ones for schools. We have the USDA recipes here, which will link you to the National Food Service Management Institute, but also we have some different recipe finder sites that are links off of this page. This is also another page that has some recipe ideas and the recipe boxes that you can click on. You can look for different food groups, food items. If you want to look seasonally, this would be a good place to perhaps try some new recipes that have already been tested on quantity cooking and are successful. Another area that I found was very helpful was the Maine Department of Education. They have recorded short training modules. They're between 5 to 9 minutes long. I found them very interesting and helpful. Some subjects that they cover were how to use the food buying guide, how to credit your vegetables in a recipe, crediting your meat like we covered earlier. It goes more in depth on meat and grains, how to credit those in recipes, how to use your food buying calculator, crediting your meat alternates in the National School Lunch Program, and also crediting fruit and vegetables in the National School Lunch Program. So I found that these were very helpful. The link is here, and we did talk to the state of Maine, and with their permission we are giving you this information. This concludes the presentation on menu planning. We are available in the office. Here is our contact information. The Nutrition and Wellness Programs Division, there are several of us here who would be happy to answer your questions. You can send them in via the email, cnp@isbe.net, or give us a call at either of these numbers, and we'd be happy to work with you in planning your menus. Thank you.